What are you making of this? It's just another one of these salvos, is it not? But there's something concrete being demanded there.
Yeah,
being acknowledged.
So we are getting, I think, over the last few weeks, starting from Mike Pence's speech earlier this month, we're getting a much broader perspective from Washington about what it is they're trying to achieve. Right? For most of this year, the Chinese side have sort of felt that this was just about the bilateral deficit, and if we can commit to buying more from the U.S., this problem goes away. And what you're seeing now is that there is a much more fundamental objective here, and that is to open the Chinese market to imports of goods and services, to force China to adopt a much more liberal approach to foreign direct investment, rather than requiring firms to invest in China through minority stakes and joint ventures. And until China shows a willingness to negotiate on all those fronts, I think the pressure from Washington is going to get worse and worse.
And the hardball being played by the White House seems to be much harder with China than anywhere else, because we've been able to see things like NAFTA, we've been able to see other trade agreements, such as the one with Korea, renegotiated with very minor changes, and all you simply get is a little tweet and a little victory for Donald Trump there.
But it has mentioned on a special line that they cannot deal with any non-market economies, which basically is targeting China.
Yes. So the issue is that the disagreement between the United States and China is much deeper, more fundamental, more profound than the issues they have with Europe and Japan and had with Canada and Mexico. So it's going to take a lot more from the Chinese side in terms of willingness to negotiate across a much broader range of issues, and it's going to be things that are going to be very difficult, I think, for President Xi to negotiate away.
Can he do it? That's the thing. Can this be enough? Because you've got the other narrative, which is now changed in China and is coming out in state editorials, that they are accusing, effectively, the White House of trying to bring China down.
And again, if you sort of listen to Washington, you can understand why the Chinese would say this is about containment. There's a political issue here as much as an economic issue. Can he negotiate on the terms that the Americans want? Absolutely. The Xi Jinping of 2012 would have welcomed opening up the Chinese economy more. It would have welcomed a liberalization of the investment regime for foreign companies. So we're trying to sort out who Xi Jinping is.
Is this still a push towards capitalism then, or do you think that we're still kind of veering towards this kind of command economy right now in China?
I think there is much more uncertainty in China about what direction reform is going. That on balance, reform over the last 3 or 4 years has been rather more statist, rather more biased again towards state-owned enterprises playing a leading role, where private entrepreneurs thought that in 2012 and 13 the signal was that they were going to play the leading role.
Yeah.
What the U.S. is trying to do essentially is to force Xi Jinping to implement the kinds of reforms that we and they and I think most people in 2012 thought that he was committing to.
I thought your chief China economist, Zhang Zhiwei, had a really important point and a very good one. Can we just throw up the quote here? He basically was saying Chinese production serving the rest of the world is 5 times more important than the supply chain serving the U.S. So the question he's raised is, will tariffs drive supply chains from China that serve other countries? The House view seems that it will not. So China can essentially, you think, still supply to the rest of the world and be okay.
I think the focus for the U.S. is increasingly narrow in terms of the supply chain dynamics is on electronics. It matters less whether you're buying all your furniture and clothing from China, but I think the U.S. is concerned that if they look at China as a strategic adversary, that they're importing still all their computers and most of their mobile phones and other communications equipment from China, and that's a real vulnerability. So their interest is that part of the China supply chain exits China to a considerable degree, but I think they're much less worried about the rest.